Did the Iran war just end? Here's the truth behind the surprise ceasefire. So many of us would have woken up to surprising news this morning that US President Donald Trump has reached a ceasefire agreement with Iran. However, given that it's just a 2-week agreement, many will be asking the question, well, what does this actually mean in the greater war at large? Does this actually mean that a pathway is being forged towards a permanent deal? Or could this simply be a break in hostilities? And so in this video, I'm going to explain exactly where I think everybody stands, including where the Israel-Lebanon front stands as well. But before we get into it, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's entirely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below. If you would like to support the channel and enjoy some additional perks, you can become a Power Club member. All you have to do is click on the join button below the video. Now let's get started. So here we have an article straight from Israel's Channel 11, Kan 11, which is a national broadcaster, explaining that Trump has announced the ceasefire deal. So we see here that Trump announced that he has agreed to suspend the bombings and attacks on Iran for a period of 2 weeks. In a post on his social media account, Trump announced that after talks with Pakistan and following the Iranian regime's agreement to immediately, completely, and safely open the Strait of Hormuz, he agreed to stop the attacks. So just to provide a little bit of context, a few days ago, Trump uploaded a Truth Social post in which he explained that he's basically going to attack the power plants in Iran as well as the bridges if the Iranians decided not to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And then yesterday he uploaded another social media post where he basically said the end of a civilization is near, and it sounded as if he's talking about regime change in Iran, because he did say how 47 years of suffering would come to an end as well. Furthermore, Pakistan has been the mediator in these talks. Moving on with the article, it explains that Trump briefed Prime Minister Netanyahu, so that's the Israeli Prime Minister, shortly before announcing the ceasefire. A White House official made it clear that Israel is part of the ceasefire agreed with Iran and that it will not attack it as long as it continues and negotiations are ongoing. This is according to CNN. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office issued a statement this morning in support of US President Trump's decision, but clarified the 2-week ceasefire does not include Lebanon. Remember, in addition to the war on the Iranian front, Israel is fighting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon at the moment. Israel supports President Trump's decision to suspend attacks against Iran for 2 weeks, provided that Iran immediately opens the strait and ceases all attacks on the United States, Israel, and countries in the region, the statement read. It also states that the United States has informed Israel that it is committed to achieving these goals shared by the United States, Israel, and Israel's regional allies in the framework of the upcoming negotiations. An Israeli source told Kan News, I realize it says Kenneth, but I think that's just a poor translation, it's Kan News. We were surprised by Trump's decision. We received updates at the last moments when everything seemed closed. We are subject to the ceasefire. An Israeli source said that the date of the ceasefire depends on the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. However, Israel is concerned about the temporary ceasefire reached between the US and Iran, an Israeli source told CNN. At the same time, the source noted that Israel will comply with the ceasefire. The source added that Israel is complying with the ceasefire reluctantly, as it has other goals and objectives to achieve in the military operation in Iran. So there's a lot of questions that are probably swirling around in a lot of your minds, as is the case with mine. Does this actually provide a pathway to a permanent ceasefire? The Israelis are clearly not very happy about it, and so are they maybe going to continue the war at some stage, even if, the 2 weeks expires and nothing else comes of it? And then I think the other big question is how much of both Israel's and the United States' war objectives have actually been achieved, because many people have been speaking about, yes, making sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, but then there have also been talks of regime change. And so this is all stuff that we really need to take into account. But before we go there, I do want to just make mention of another important fact. So ceasefires, especially in the Middle East, are not always able to hold throughout their intended lifespan. And we've seen this very recently in the Gaza war. Now, I would like to show you this timeline of the Gaza war, which I found, and I think it's very important for us to note what happened in Gaza as well as Lebanon when looking at what's going to potentially happen in Iran. So we know for a fact that on the 7th of October 2023, the initial attack on Israel by Hamas happened. And then, of course, by the 28th of October 2023, Israel decided to begin the ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. If we look at the first ceasefire, that was from the 24th of November until 11th January 2024. That ceasefire happened as a means of getting the first hostage exchange done. Now, of course, we need to remember that once that exchange was done and tensions simmered yet again, the fighting continued. We then see how in 27th of November 2024, another ceasefire happened, and that lasted until the 18th of January. And then the next day, 19th of January, another ceasefire happened, and that lasted until the 17th of March. Now, at that time, we saw the next few rounds of hostage exchanges take place. And so it was a time when everybody sort of thought, well, now we're going to see an end to the war. But then what we saw is how in March, everything reignited. And it took all the way until October of 2025 in order for a sort of lasting ceasefire to come into existence. And up until the time of recording, that ceasefire has held. Of course, there have been cross-border skirmishes, but ultimately there's been no reignition of the initial war. Now, it's important for us to understand that because what we seem to see, and this could be the case here as well, is that ceasefires are kind of objective based. It's not as if people are going to get together and say, okay, we're having this ceasefire. We're going to take it as gospel. It's definitely going to hold and nobody's going to do anything. That's just not the way that the Middle East works. The Middle East, I would say, is actually one of the most unpredictable places where it really just takes one crazy person to reignite the entire region. We also need to remember that in the Lebanon conflict, back in November 2024, Israel and Lebanon managed to reach a ceasefire where Hezbollah withdrew beyond the Litani River. So they left southern Lebanon. Yet they came back down past the border, and a day or two after the current Iran war started, we saw Hezbollah attack Israel from Lebanon. And so that dragged them into the war yet again. And so the first thing that I think we need to remember is that ceasefires, whether we like it or not, basically need to be taken with a pinch of salt. But now on to the next important question, which is whether or not this will actually be a permanent ceasefire, and more than that, whether or not the war objectives have been achieved. And there are quite a few things we need to think about in this regard. Firstly, no, I don't think that war objectives have necessarily been achieved. I think that Israel's objectives are a lot clearer than what America's are. We've noticed that the Trump administration sort of jumps around when they talk about what they're actually trying to achieve here. Even when it came to the 2025 conflict, the 12-day one, they didn't really explain which objectives had been achieved after the bombings of the nuclear sites. They just said, oh, our objectives have been achieved. So they've been very quiet about it. As for Israel, I think it's clear. Israel wants there to firstly be an elimination of the nuclear capabilities of Iran so that it's no longer an existential threat. I do think that Israelis would like to see a regime change, as I'm sure many Iranians in the diaspora want as well. But ultimately, this seems to be more of a long-term and a lot more difficult kind of a goal to reach. Still, I think it is important for us to keep these goals in mind, because a 2-week ceasefire, in my view, is a paper-thin agreement that can pretty much get thrown out the window at any time. Let's also not forget that Iran might decide to fire back during that period as well. Now, with all of this in mind, and seeming as if this war is only half complete, one would ask, well, why reach a ceasefire in the first place? And I think it's pretty clear. On the American side, Trump's very concerned about there being the sort of oil crisis brought on by the Strait of Hormuz closure. Of course, 20% of all oil as well as gas worldwide passes through that transit point. And so it's very important for global energy markets if the strait can be reopened. So it is very much possible that he's thinking about the commercial consequences. On the military front, however, there are some reasons why a ceasefire might be reached. We need to remember that Israel has been defending itself from hundreds of Iranian missiles. We know for a fact that the 500 missile strikes tally has already been passed. For all we know, it's now thousands of Iranian missiles that have entered Israel. And so it's a very good chance that this 2-week ceasefire gives Israel the time to restock on its defensive interceptors. We do know that Israel also amended its budget for 2026 and added on about $32 billion, or rather 32 billion shekels in additional defense spending. And so it's very possible that Israel could be looking to use this additional money to replenish its stocks. We also know that, of course, the United States has been actively involved as well, making even more strikes on Iran than what the Israelis have. And so they might also be needing to replenish their stocks and basically fix any damage to American infrastructure, whether it be weaponry, vehicles, jets, or even perhaps infrastructure at naval bases and air bases within the Persian Gulf. And so there are many reasons why this could be done. It could be done because they're looking for a lasting peace, but it could also be as a means of regrouping, restocking, and hitting Iran even harder than before. Ultimately, this is a situation where we all need to keep our eyes peeled and take nothing for granted because, as I said, the Middle East is a highly unpredictable place, and basically you have to keep your eyes peeled. You cannot let your guard down for a minute. But let's see what happens. I think these are really important days, and ultimately the next few days and events that follow could reshape the Middle East and even the world as we know it. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.